I'm Parker, and I use they, them pronouns.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I use he, him pronouns.
And welcome to
the Graphic Novel Podcast. Welcome to our show. Welcome to another episode of this wonderful thing that we do each and every week. On the show, we like to discuss graphic novels, zines, and other comics, and we like to throw in a little bit of real life.
Like we talk about queer stuff. We talk about relationships. We talk about race issues. We sometimes talk about death.
Talk about a lot of different things. We bring you an episode every week, and if you like the show, the way to help us get the word out is by going on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or YouTube or any one of those places and give us a review. Give us 5 stars on Apple. That's how other people can find out about us.
And most importantly, share with your friends. When you share this podcast with your friends, more people are listening to us and you help us out. Also, when you subscribe to the podcast, it's going to pop right up as soon as we upload the episode, so it'll be there waiting for you when you're ready to listen.
That's right. You can interact with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Insta. And if you visit us at anchor.fm/graphic novel podcast, you can actually leave us a voice message.
We might just play it on air.
If you're lucky. Now, we've had some people come and go on Twitter, keep hovering and people adding us and liking us, and then they must see some of the political stuff and they drop off. But a lot of the comics people we follow are political, and a
lot of stuff we read is political.
A lot of the stuff is. It's what we're talking about today is extremely political.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of these things that just, I don't know. People, if they can't handle it, that's fine. I don't want.
They're not going to enjoy the show if they don't like what we post on Twitter. Honestly,
that is 100% true. And we don't usually do any posts. Sometimes I like stuff, or once in a while I'll retweet something that I think is important that other people see.
Yeah, Mike is really the handler of the Twitter.
The twit. Yeah.
The twit.
The twit.
Is that what the kids are calling it these days?
The kids, they call it Insta. We call it the twit. But how are you today?
Great. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing really good. It's a beautiful day out. Had a nice long weekend and spent time with the family. Well, everybody's spending time with their family if they're
I mean, not necessarily. They could be, locked away in a closet.
They could be like our neighbor who's in 3 different locations.
Oh my God, our poor neighbor.
So I guess we're lucky to be together.
Yes.
And it's good. It's good. So today we've got all the regular stuff. We got some news. We've got a couple of reviews, quick reviews, and our main event. First thing, let's do the news. All right. So I was looking at something. I try to find all interesting graphic novels and stuff coming out and see what might be newsworthy. And Electric Century is a band that's started by Mikey Way. He's the bassist from My Chemical Romance. His brother's Gerard Way. They're both into comics, and Gerard Way did what was that show? Umbrella Academy.
Oh, I love that show.
Yeah. Well, he did the book. The book,
really, I'm in love with Ellen Page. That's where my love of the show.
Right.
But the show's good.
So Mikey, his brother, started this other band when My Chemical Romance broke up, and they announced a new album and a graphic novel to go along with it. And that's not something that's apparently that unique, because Skillet has a second graphic novel coming out. There's jazz icon Charlie Parker's story in a graphic novel, and some other ones too. They all come from the Z2 Comics, which is pretty cool. And just a little about this Electric Century. So Johnny Ashford, former sitcom star, drives drunk through a storefront and gets arrested. His aspiring actress girlfriend bails him out, and he begins seeing a hypnotherapist. Dr. Evers sends Johnny to his happy place, 1980s Atlantic City, where he relives his childhood on the boardwalk, hardly noticing shadowy specters all around. Johnny's addiction shifts from alcohol to his hypnotic trips to the boardwalk and the Electric Century Casino, which satisfies his desire for fame. So it's pretty cool. Mikey Way says, I'm delighted to announce this book. The genesis of the story has been many years in the making, created with some of my closest friends. Getting to bring the two things I am most passionate about together, comics and music, has been exciting, challenging, and unbelievably rewarding. So he's working with Simon Way, or Sean Simon, and artist Toby Cypress. And it's a riveting, mind-bending journey through a world that complements the music for their second album. So it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Years ago, back Comics TV Day, there was a comic called Trap Man, and they did the old radio show style thing. They actually did it on cassette, the whole thing. It was like a regular radio show with special effects and everything. And that was pretty cool. This sounds like it's going to be music that's going to complement the comic, which is pretty cool. And I'd kind of like to read that and listen to that music. Do you have something to discuss here?
I do.
All right.
So, most people have probably heard about the incident that happened in Central Park in the Ramble. There was a woman who was, I don't know why she had her dog off her leash, and this man, Christian Cooper, asked her to put her dog on the leash and starts recording for his own protection, and she says that she's gonna call the police and tell them. Somebody he walks up to her and says, doesn't even really walk up to her. He didn't really approach her all that much. Mm-hmm. And she says, I'm gonna tell I'm gonna call the police and tell them an African American man is threatening me. And he's like, all right, call the police. You're the one breaking the law here. And then she gets on the phone as she's choking her dog, gets on the phone and gets into this panicked state, puts on this panicked voice.
Exactly.
Purpose. I'm being threatened. I'm being threatened by this African American man in the Ramble, and so he's got this all on camera. Anyway, the reason that we're telling this story, as I'm sure you've all heard this story, but the man who survived this incident, Christian Cooper, actually was a former editor at Marvel Comics. And he helped give life to Yoshi Mashima, the first openly homosexual character in the Star Trek universe. So I thought that was a very cool little tidbit about him and kind of connected to our thing. Yeah. I guess the character didn't. I'm not a Star Trek fan. Do you remember the character?
No,
at all?
I don't know anything about it. I didn't read the comics.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I wouldn't know anything.
Did you watch the show?
Star Trek, the original Star Trek, but I watched some of the stuff after that. You watched some of it too.
Yeah. Well, The Next Generation. My mom and brother were Next Generation fans.
Yeah, I don't remember even what
and
I watched.
I think my brother and mom also watched
Deep Space
Voyager.
Nine.
Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
I think they were more Voyager fans, but they were definitely Next Generation fans.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know until like last year that the original Star Trek was only one season.
Yeah, no kidding.
That was surprising to me.
Yeah, and it's carried on for so long.
Yeah, but I thought that was pretty cool. He kind of gave life to this character, the first queer character too in the Marvel Comics. So
yeah,
I thought that was pretty interesting. Doesn't sound like he lasted too long, but
yeah, but
the character, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
But that's very cool, and I'm glad that he survived. As we know, in those exact same incidents happen all over our country, and oftentimes, the black man does not survive that. So happy that he did.
Yes, and in this case, Karen got her due, and she got fired.
She did. I was very happy to see that. She honestly deserves a false police report charge.
Exactly, too, without a doubt.
Among I don't know. Good slapping, but
without a doubt she needs that too. All right.
Thank you to Michael for pointing that article out to me, sending me that article. We were just about getting ready to record, and he sends me the article, and I went, "Oh, I didn't know that."
All right. A couple quick reviews. Dynamite, which we talked about a few times on the show. They had a sale. I don't know, probably 3-4 weeks ago, and they had selling a lot of their graphic novels, and I think they were like half off. And I saw that they had Gumby Imagined, a big hardcover book full of photos and layouts and stuff from when they were doing Gumby, the original Art Clokey Gumby. I think this is written by his wife and son, and it's pretty cool. It shows all the scenes. You see how small this stuff is, and it's really cool to see this claymation stuff. And they also did Davy and Goliath, which I'm not now as an adult. I'm less of a fan because it was pretty Christiany, but I don't know how often it was. But yeah, so that and last week we mentioned finger guns, and when we did, the creators were really happy that we did, and they sent us advanced copies of issues number 2 and 3, which number 2 comes out on June 3rd, and number 3 comes out on July 1st. Without a doubt, you guys have to get finger guns. These are comics, single issues. I'm sure once they get to a point, they could probably do a trade paperback. But this is a good story. I like this a lot, and I'm not going to give anything away about it. But Finger Guns is it was really enjoyable, and I would definitely recommend looking for that. I forgot who that's by. I think it's Scout, but I don't want to say that for sure. Anyhow, let's talk about this week's book. I mean, we talked about the incident with Mr. Cooper, another racist, political related incident, and today's book fits that theme to a T.
I just found out this book is actually has been frequently challenged on banned books to be a banned book because of the content.
Of course it has.
I mean, of course it has, but it just pisses me off.
I agree 100%. We are talking about probably one of the most famous, and probably one of the best for the type of the way that he attacked the story, I guess. One of the best comics probably ever done.
Yeah.
We're talking about Mouse by Art Spiegelman. And it's something that you have to read. It should be read by everyone.
Oh, yeah. This needs to be, I mean, honestly, high school history class.
Without a doubt.
Should be read in every single one. And I don't know. It's frustrating to me how little of our own history we learn. And I, grew up in Washington, and you would think that our history classes would be a little more
progressive.
But they,
what did you learn about the internment camps and George Takei?
Yeah, exactly.
Right in our own state.
Exactly.
So
I don't even know if I learned about that in school at all. I think that I learned about it at the state fair one year, yep. And which God, just makes me angry. Anyway,
tell us about Mouse.
So, the very quick synopsis: a brutally moving work of art, widely hailed as the greatest graphic novel ever written, Mouse recounts the chilling experiences of the author's father during the Holocaust, with Jews drawn as wide-eyed mice and Nazis as menacing cats.
Art Spiegelman is an American cartoonist, editor, comics advocate, best known for his graphic novel Mouse. His work as co-editor on the comics magazines Arcade and Raw has been influential, and from 1992 he spent a decade as contributing artist for The New Yorker. He's married to designer and editor Francois Mouly, and is the father of writer Nadia Spiegelman. Nadia. He also has a son named Dash. Might as well throw him in there and mention the whole other family, but maybe Dash doesn't.
Where's the where'd that come from? Really? Maybe there was a falling out or something?
No,
it was interviewed for that book, the other book that you read.
Yeah. It's from Wikipedia. Anybody can write that. But
that's why.
But so we've got Parker's read half of book 2. I had bought book episode 1 or book 1 and book 2. I know that there's you can buy a book with both of them in it. But I was really interested in this after reading them. I believe I read this. I'm pretty sure one of my friends had this back in the 80s or early 90s, I should say. And I'm pretty sure I read it then. But I was looking to see if there was anything else about it. I'm like, this would make a great, animated movie or something. And I found Meta Mouse, which is a big, thick hardcover book with a DVD, CD thing that has all kinds of other stuff in it. I haven't looked at it yet. I don't. I
is it
think
a CD? They're two different things.
Well, they're the same size. I don't know which one. I think it's a DVD. But the whole book basically is an interview that Art Spiegelman did.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I have so many things. I want to mention two things that are the same size that are completely different things.
Excuse me. That was not right.
My brain's just not functioning fast.
So Meta Mouse is this long interview that he did with this journalist, and throughout this is interspersed all kinds of. He gave her access to his archives and all of his diaries and notebooks and everything, and she went through and she picked out all kinds of stuff, all kinds of drawings, and she picked out snippets, and she asked him questions from things that he doesn't even remember writing. He's kind of like me when I write something. When I'm through writing a book, I like throw it out of my brain. I'm like, I'm done with it. And when I have to go do a talk, like the first time I have to do a talk, I have to like read it over, and I have to
and you wait until
re-educate myself on what I wrote, because it might be a common thing that people do. I know he said that in the interview he couldn't even remember when his father died, because it was something that once he wrote it down, it was done. And he couldn't remember it. The book was so influential and so powerful, it defined him, and I think it created a problem for him.
I'm sure.
It was like
the pressure to.
Yep, and you could never create another mouse. He said, like I forgot the author of Catch.
Well, and he put so much time and energy, and I mean, just the whole time he's recording his father, the conversations that he's drawing.
Well,
and
you said what it's about, right? The Holocaust and Auschwitz, and
Nazis, and
yeah. I mean, it's about how his father, primarily how his father survived being a Jew.
But he went so far beyond just not anybody, obviously, but he could have easily have just recorded his father's stories and done the comic book based explicitly off of his stories.
Correct.
He went like 10 steps further than that. Yep. He did so much more research to make sure that his drawings were accurate.
For the locations, not the mice, but yes, for the locations, like what things look like. And
what? The mice?
So the mice look at. No, you're right.
But it's a history book, and he wanted to make sure, I'm guessing, that the history was accurate. And
this is timeless.
You said that some historian challenged him on something?
Yes. So there were the latrines, the toilets.
Oh, right.
They had in some of the barracks, they had these long boards with holes spread out along far enough apart that people could sit next to each other and do, because
that's what you want to do, is sit
business
next to each other. I'm joking. They don't care what anybody wants.
They don't give a fuck, because they're going to throw them in a fucking pit anyhow.
Yeah, I know.
But exactly. But
that was so insensitive of you to say it like that.
But I mean, but they didn't care. They didn't care. I don't know. I guess I'm surprised that they even did that. I'm surprised they did that, since they knew that they were just going to use them to death and discard them.
Well, I
think
they
just don't want shit everywhere. They didn't want to have to
exactly. Then it's their mess to clean up, right?
Probably. Well, no, because they used because this was in Poland.
Yeah, they used the Polish people.
They used Polish people a lot to work. They used other Jews who would do anything to stay alive. They used them as guards. They used them as like managers.
Because it was you. We learned it was you against everyone. Like your cousin didn't matter anymore. You had to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You and your wife had to survive.
So the latrines, his father tells him that in the one story, he hid sitting on the toilet in this bathroom.
I think this is from book 2, though.
Yeah. but that's what you're saying. Those are the kind of things he did.
Okay.
And he's sitting on the toilet while they do this selection where they basically go through and they pick a bunch of people that they're going to kill. And he when he told the story, or when somebody had read it, this oral historian said, "You got that wrong." And he's like, "No, I got it right." And he went to Auschwitz, and he had taken photos. There was a barrack that was still one that was left, that they left standing. And there were those toilets, just like his father had said.
Yeah.
And he needed that picture so he could draw it accurately for book 2.
Yeah.
But
and his father's recollection of everything is amazing to me.
well, one thing he says in his other book, in MetaMouse, is that he wonders. He said when he would ask his father certain things, if it was something that his father hadn't talked about before, the story wasn't really smooth. He said that he wonders, like, his father had told some of these stories so many times, they became stories that he could just tell. So he wondered probably at some point where some of them were just, stories that had maybe been, he didn't say it, but I'm guessing, like, maybe been embellished.
Well, I mean, everybody's story, that's like we talked about with first, what is it called? When you're in court and there's a eyewitness.
Yeah.
The eyewitness testimony is not very reliable, not nearly as reliable as people make it seem, because it's your memory. Like what you see is never going to be the exact same thing as what the person standing next to you sees. So it's not surprising to me that his memory wouldn't be, exactly precise.
Right. I'm sorry. When Art's mother killed herself in 1968, he wasn't writing this yet, so he didn't get to ask her story, and his parents didn't talk a lot about their background. I mean, most of their families were killed. Almost all of their families were killed in Auschwitz and other camps.
Yeah.
So they lost almost everybody, and they just didn't talk about it. It was part of their life. But
and how horrifying to have to relive it. Which is why it's surprising to me the amount of detail that he goes into, because and like he shows a drawing of his father with the number tattooed on his arm, and it's so heartbreaking. I mean, the whole thing is heartbreaking.
Yeah,
but also so friggin' important.
Important that we
read it, that we know it.
Yes, that we do, and we talk about it, and more people don't forget about it. Just recently, they showed some in Germany, some guy raising his hand up to do the Heil Hitler. Cop came behind him, politely put his arm down, and said, "You're under arrest for violating the whatever the moral code that they have is for that." You showed me that picture the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still dealing with this. I mean, it's making a comeback, obviously, in this country too.
Yeah,
it's always been boiling below the surface, but under the Fuhrer that we have running,
I don't even know if it was boiling below the surface, but they've definitely
they were on the fringes. Yeah,
they've definitely been emboldened to.
Yes.
Yeah,
you're right. They might not have been, but they were on the fringe, so nobody ever talked about them.
Right.
But yes, they've been emboldened.
But is that good? Is it good that we don't talk about them? No.
I don't know.
If we don't talk about them, they secretly gain power, and look at what we have.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, he makes the Polish people pigs, which they weren't real happy with afterwards. They didn't like it. He went back there to do some research.
Well, I think anybody can find a problem with any time they're turned into an animal. There's always, I mean, even, didn't you say that there were Jewish people that didn't like that he drew them as mice?
Well, yeah, no, but they weren't. Nobody. A lot of the, especially the people that were survivors, they weren't happy that the story was even told in a comic book, because to them it's a comic book. It was a funny book, And he had to explain to a lot of people that, look, this is just a medium that I used. This wasn't intended to be a funny book.
Right.
There's some funny things because my dad was funny sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's not supposed to be a comedy.
Right.
And a lot of people didn't understand that, especially older people who looked down on comics, for that matter.
Well, even his father, at one point, he said that he became a comic book artist because it was the one thing that his father
couldn't do, because his father could do anything. His father would learn to survive during World War II. His father would learn how to do anything. He learned how to be a tinsmith or a baker, or how to repair shoes, anything that could get him to move along one step
To be
further.
useful to somebody.
Yes, to be useful, so they didn't want to get rid of him. He learned how to he would bargain. He didn't smoke, so when they would give them cigarettes, he would save the cigarettes so he could trade them for food or something else to other people.
Yeah.
So he was smart that way,
Yeah.
But what about? But there's funny parts, like he's visiting his dad for dinner, and he goes to leave, and he goes, "Can I have my coat?" Art does, and his father.
Oh yeah, he's looking for his coat.
Yeah,
he's looking. Have you seen my coat? He asks his father's wife, Mala, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen my coat? And she says, no, I haven't seen it. So then he asks his dad. He's like, I threw it in the trash.
He's like, what? He's like, threw it out. That's an old coat. You don't need that. He's like, you don't just throw people's clothing out. He's like, here, I've got this one. I barely wore it. Here, I barely wore this one.
I barely wore it.
I got a new one here. He's like, it's too big on me. Oh, it looks great. But it's like just one of those things. His father, among, there's this stereotype of cheap Jewish people, and he said that even his father took that to the nth degree, that even Jewish people thought his father was cheap. That's
neighbors next door.
Yes.
Oh, I think that's book 2 though.
It might be. I mean, we're just talking. We can just talk about the whole thing. I mean, because
his wife too, who was a Holocaust survivor.
His second wife, yeah.
Sorry, yes, second wife talked about how cheap he was.
I mean, he would find a piece of string on the ground and he'd pick it up, or he found found some wire, like copper wire from a phone line,
telephone wire.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, pick that up, Artie. He's like, I don't want that. He's like, what do I want that for? That's good to tie things up with. You can use that.
You can't buy wire like that.
Exactly. He'd find stuff, and I can't imagine what it was like to clean his stuff out when he died, or when, I know he moved. They moved to Florida at one point, but he must have had a ton of junk, just all kinds of stuff like that.
But it wasn't junk to him.
No, not to his father. Because, like I said, he made himself so resourceful that when somebody needed a guard needed a shoe repaired, a boot repaired, he's like, I'll do it. He goes, I'll do it better than that. He goes, well, if you can do it so you can't see the stitch, he goes, then whatever. So he went that night. He knew somebody who was who had repaired shoes. He found him. He paid him something that he had, and the guy taught him how to do it. That night, he had the guy do it for him.
Mm-hmm.
Brought it back to the guard the next day, and the guard's like, whoa, this is great. They give him extra food then, and it's that kind of thing. And then he was the one that was repairing shoes all the time. All the guards would come and give him their shoes, their boots to repair, because he was useful.
That's in book 2, I think.
Yeah, it could be.
Because the end of book 1 is when they first get sent to Auschwitz.
Right. I'm kind of mixing it all because I read both of them. Plus, I've read,
and you've read the other one.
I've read half of the of his interview too, which is a big, thick book. So everything is just blending together. But you're right, that ends in Auschwitz, and I don't remember what happened. But we haven't even talked. I mean, his father and his father's wife both came from money. They were both wealthy. Their fathers he was, and his father-in-law were both wealthy business owners.
Yeah.
So they both had these nice businesses and everything, and it was just once this happened, they all tried to escape because they knew that they were coming for the Jews, and they just had to get out. And they were caught multiple times. They were arrested,
and they had a lot of close calls too.
Yeah,
he had to have working papers so that he had permission to be out,
yeah,
out and about and doing, heading to and from work. And so he, had to have papers on him at all times, because if you didn't have papers, that was it. They took you right then and there.
So I have a question. The one thing I don't know, there were several times where it shows, I don't know if it's in that book, where it shows him or his wife wearing masks. So they look like they were Poles,
right,
and not Jews.
Right.
And I don't know, did they really wear masks, or did they disguise themselves somehow, as if that's what he's trying to show?
I think he's just trying to show that they were trying to blend in.
Okay.
It did sound like his father definitely didn't have as much trouble blending in as his mother did.
She looked more Jewish.
She must have looked more Jewish.
Right.
So, but yeah, I like that part that he put pig masks on them
right,
when they were trying to just blend into a crowd.
Yeah, it was tough. We're talking about the woman calling the police on the black man. There's multiple instances. You've got one time where they were being holed up in a someplace, and these kids are yelling that there's Jew, there's a Jew, there's a Jew, there's a Jew. These are kids just yelling it. And
Yeah, they
and-
weren't. They were. He was
Oh,
walking
he was walking.
because they were. I think that point they were in a barn hiding,
And this is one of the times he was trying to blend in
and he
too.
was trying to blend in, and he probably went to buy food or something. I can't remember
Right.
off the top of my head. And so it's like, what do you do at that point? Do you run because then you're
Yep,
caught,
then you're
or
definitely
you
guilty.
just keep pretending like you are supposed to be there? That's one of the things I remember.
He was really good at that.
Yes,
Yep.
he could think quick on his feet,
Yep.
and I mean the things that he came up with too, with and a lot of people did, hiding in the attic and having the false walls and hiding. They had an area that was underneath where the coal was stored,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and there was a false wall there so that they could hide. And like hiding in the most, he had a friend who hid out in a dumpster.
Yeah, it was underneath the dumpster.
Underneath the
Mm-hmm.
dumpster, and he's like he was thinking that the old basement or whatever that he was hiding in was terrible because there was rats crawling all over them. But his friend was his friend or his cousin was hiding in literal garbage,
right?
And with his 3 little kid and wife.
Anything to try and survive.
Yeah,
a lot of these people didn't make it either.
Oh yeah,
so many of them.
Far too many of them didn't make it, and well,
and that's what you were saying at the beginning. You said that that this has been a book that's been schools. I'm assuming libraries. Yep. People have tried to get banned
books. Yeah.
He's asked about Holocaust deniers, and he said up to the time that he had done this MetaMouse that he hadn't had a lot. I'm wondering if this time around if things had heated up anymore because there's so many of these
currently
now. Yeah. But this book is 5, 7, 8 years old. But yeah, I mean, so many people that just deny that it's like the Earth is flat. The Holocaust never happened. They're all the same people. Vaccines aren't real. They all seem to be the same people.
And I think a lot of it comes from the fact like we don't learn about it in school. We don't learn about it in school, so why would you think differently? It's like
not real,
like our Civil War. The people believe that it was just about states' rights. If you ask kids raised in the South, that's what they're taught in school is that it's about states' rights. How is that teaching proper history? You can't even get your own country's history accurate.
Exactly. And when you got a state like Texas who is so big, they kind of dictate the textbook preparation for the entire country. Because they're so big and they buy so many, they can dictate what some of these textbook manufacturers, the publishers put into these books.
Yeah. Which is why, and you said too that there's college classes that use this book with and I think that's amazing. I wish more would.
Definitely. I mean, it is between the two of them. I suppose if it was the compilation, the whole thing, it would be. I mean, you could do a whole course on it easily because there's so much you could dissect. And like you said, you see it in his in MetaMouse, but his kids also mentioned that sometimes he draws a panel 20 times until he's got it down the way he wants it.
Right.
And his son said, it's like nerve-wracking watching that kind of tedious work. But then he says at the same time, I know he's doing it for himself. He's not doing it for somebody else's pleasure. It's because he wants it right. And he wants it to look the way he thinks it should be.
Right.
And it's the book is also about him. It's also about Art Spiegelman and his relationship with his father and his mother and his own mental illness, mental disease that he had when he was younger. It's all these things tied together. And there's just so many layers and so many different things. It's not just about mice and cats and people running from, there's just so many different things going on.
Yeah, I liked the fact that he drew them as animals, partly because it helps you kind of disconnect.
Yes, that's a good point.
But not enough disconnect that it takes away from the story. You know,
Mhm.
it helps you, I think, focus more on the content.
Mhm.
I felt that way anyway.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point, and it's Art Spiegelman said that, like I mentioned earlier, it was so. He said it opened so many doors, and just so you know, there are no videos, there are no movies, there are nothing. He did a documentary with a foreign company and the BBC, and he said it came out the way that he assumed it would come out, the way he didn't want it to come out. So
Oh,
he wouldn't sign off on distribution for the U.S. So nobody in the U.S. got to see it unless they got to see it from overseas.
really?
Oh yeah, he and I think that was the only thing he ever did. He used them because he wanted to go over there and he wanted to do some research.
Uh-huh.
So he used them
Wow.
for after the first book. Um,
Hmm.
But they were like, "While you're standing here, can you cry?" And he's like, "No, no." It's like and then there was a point where I think it might have been him and his wife, maybe. They were like something got him, and he was crying, and they came running up and started videoing, and he was angry, and he's like, this, and it
Yeah,
was a
that's not what
cameraman
he
that he
wants.
liked too, and it
Oh.
bothered him. But yeah, I mean, they were trying to make a product too,
Right.
They were trying to make a product about him, and he said he hasn't done a lot with museums or anything like that. He's never done anything with the Holocaust Museum in D.C. I think it is, just because it doesn't fit with their type of programming. He didn't think it did. He didn't think it fit, and they didn't.
He'd be the one who would know, I
Yeah,
guess.
but it's just.
And the artwork is amazing, and we haven't even discussed that yet. But the artwork
it's not like real clean. It's kind of dark and
all black and white.
all black and white, and I think in color would not help this.
No, I don't. I wouldn't want
I
to
could
see it
see
in
like
color.
the cover. It looks really cool in color.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah,
I think in black and white it just, and it's the time too. It's the 1940s. It kind of fits. It just really.
Yeah, I agree. I
you know.
agree with what they're telling, with what he's
Mhm.
telling. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the art is great. The when you see the screams on like the mice's faces and stuff, it's just
Mhm.
it's terrifying. Or mice hanging.
Oh yeah.
It's just the story itself is horrific. And if you've never believed any of this, you have to read this.
I don't think that if you're a Holocaust denier, I don't think you're listening to our podcast.
Probably not. But I mean, if you've never really thought about it,
Yeah.
if it's something that you've never really thought about, this book is timeless. There's
Nope.
It was
It could have been written yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just it's great.
Yeah. It also talks about how he was a prisoner of war. He was a prisoner of war because he went off to fight, or had to go off and fight. Didn't want to shoot.
Who?
Didn't want to shoot anybody.
Who didn't?
What do you mean?
Who are you talking about? His father?
Yeah.
When was he a prisoner of war?
At the very beginning of the book.
Oh, I don't know.
Because his father had starved his boys because he didn't want them to be taken.
That's right.
And so the first time he had starved him, and so he
from World War I.
Gets called to the army, and he's too skinny, too frail, and they said to come back in however many months, I don't recall.
I thought it was a year.
And he's like, yeah. Was it a whole year?
I think so.
And he didn't want to starve himself again.
Right.
So he ended up having to go.
Right. I remember that now. That's right. Yeah. He purposely starved his kids. Art Spiegelman's father, his grandfather,
yes.
starved his kids. So they'd be too weak and frail in order to fight, because he didn't want them to go and fight. It was for World War I, I'm pretty sure, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure that's because that was the Germans again, just trying to, it's not today, but at that time it was. They were just trying to do this, and then when Hitler came along, it changed things. He was just trying to take over the world, and there's very little about Hitler. This is more about
it's
the Jewish.
It's just about his father's story. It's his father's story,
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit, like you said, about his mother too. Although he does talk about right near the very end. Again, he talks about how he throughout the book, actually, he talked about his mother had diaries, and so he wants to see these diaries.
Yeah.
And so then at the very end, he finds out that his father has burned the books. The diaries. He was depressed. He didn't know what he was doing.
After
It
his
sounds like
mother
because
had
his
died,
mother
yeah.
had died by suicide,
Mhm.
and he found the body,
Right. Who, the father?
her body, yeah. And so he was just they were so full of memories, and he burned them.
Yeah.
And Art was pissed.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Mhm.
I would be mad too, and because when you find out in the second book, that when they were taken to Auschwitz, they were separated, so
Right.
they didn't
For
even
a long time.
they didn't even know that
Mhm.
each other were okay.
Yep.
And so that's a whole part of his family story that he never got.
Right, because he doesn't know where his mother went. He knows some of where she was because they both ended up at Auschwitz together.
Right.
And the father was able to find that through people he knew, because a lot of the people everybody seemed to know
Vladik.
people.
Have we not? Have
Yeah,
we said
his name was Vladik.
Yeah.
His mother was, I think it's Anya,
Yeah, I think so.
and Mala was Vladik's second wife,
Right.
who also went through all that.
Right, because that's one of the things he says.
And she wasn't happy getting together with him. Because he loved his first wife, and I think that he even says, "Why did I get remarried?"
Oh yes, they bickered the entire book. They
break up at some point.
They were that's the start of book 2. Mala leaves.
Yeah.
But you could tell that they were miserable together. There was no love there. I'm not quite certain.
He seemed to be a little.
He just needed somebody to take care of him, I think.
Yeah.
But she was very unhappy, and he didn't give her money to, do anything to take care of herself.
That sounds a little like my grandfather.
Yeah.
My grandfather was like that too. I don't think I think my grandmother used to hide money from him.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because he was like that. He didn't want to give her money to go buy things, and it was
ridiculous.
Old people. It was, he was born in 1903 or whatever. I mean, it's not much different.
Well, it shows the way that men think that they have ownership over women.
That too. But yeah, this is such a good book.
Yes, I think everybody needs to jump out and read it. Go buy it now.
The big black stand at Africa. I mean, Attica, not Africa. Big black stand at Attica.
Yeah.
And George Takei's book.
Yeah, we have read some big history books.
I think,
and they don't feel as. What do you feel like in comparing the not camps, the jails that they were put in here versus what we saw in the Holocaust? Do you feel like there was any kind of similarities between what we did to the Japanese and
I don't think it was as bad. We didn't put them in ovens and kill them.
No, but we didn't. I mean, they weren't treated well. They were sleeping in horse.
And it was Japanese
stalls.
and Germans. It was two different things.
No, I know.
I mean,
I know they aren't the same.
The Japanese just took advantage of the Germans trying to take over the world.
I felt a lot of the same stuff. They're pulled out of their own homes.
Yeah, yeah.
And moved to places that they didn't know, and they didn't know what they didn't know what was going to come of it. They didn't know if they were going to survive it.
Yeah, it's not a apples for apples thing. I don't think.
No, certainly not. No,
not an apples for apples thing. And yes, they didn't know. They were just yanked. They were just American citizens, just yanked from their homes. And
yeah.
But those 3 books that we've read, and one more we're going to read later this year. These are definitely must-read history books. I think that everybody should read. They're about horrible times in the history of our country and in the world. I mean, they're things that the comic form does a real good job of portraying some of these things.
Yeah, I think that it's actually a really good way to get that history out. I mean, and especially the way that he researched everything. I just mind-blowing.
It is.
The detail that he put into it.
Yeah, I had bought it a while ago because I was looking up early on when we started this. We're at like episode 41, I believe. And
we are episode 41.
Yeah, and I was looking at some lists of like the top graphic novels of all time, and this was one of them. It's in there. There's another one that we've got. I'm not sure if we'll get to it or when we'll get to it, but Will Eisner did a lot of stuff too, and this was one of them. And I've had it, and it's like, you know what? Let's do this. And I'm glad we did, because it's really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Everything about it. There's nothing that I can say that there's the art, the story.
No critiques. There's
no,
nothing that I thought could have been done differently, or
no. It's
no.
an amazing book.
Yeah,
I
agree.
The thing is, and people wonder why it's 2 books too, because they're not huge, but they're too small.
Well, they're not tiny either, though.
And they're like, how come you didn't do An American Tale? An American Tale, that's the book, Steven Spielberg. So what happened was, he was finishing this first book, or he was working on it, and he was at this point, and all of a sudden they heard that Steven Spielberg is doing this American Tale, this rat or mouse, Jewish mouse, this whole similar type of story. Obviously, they had read some of his early strips, some of his early comics that had come out. So his publisher said, we've got to get this out and beat Spielberg, because if we come out afterwards, people are going to say, oh, look at you, just copied, Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
So they got the first half, which became book 1 out, and then it turned out that they had union problems, and they couldn't get all the animation and everything done. So that came out later. So he beat them to it. So that probably changed the history for this book.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
But and for Art Spiegelman himself, this was. He'll probably never listen to this, because we are nobody compared to him. But he had said that this I mentioned earlier, it defined him, and he didn't want to be defined just by this.
Right.
And he ended up working at the New Yorker for, I think it was like 10 years, and doing a lot of comics for them.
Yeah.
And branching out and doing other things too, which helped him. Instead of pigeonholing him like a lot of actors, they do something that is a super huge hit, and it's like, oh, that's who you are. You look like Spider-Man. I can't put you as the tough guy in this movie now, because you're Spider-Man. So it's a good thing. Good book. I'm glad that we have it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Anything else for us today?
I don't think so. I think we can wrap it up.
All right. Well, we appreciate you listening. Like we mentioned early on, make sure you check out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, any of those places. Give us 5 stars. Give us a review. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell anybody. Just help us spread the word. That's how our show grows and how we get more listeners. And we do this for the love of doing it. We don't make any money doing this. So
nope.
We're just doing it because we really enjoy it.
And we love reading graphic comics, graphic novels.
Yeah. So until next time, my name is Mike.
And I'm Parker.
And this is
the Graphic Novel Podcast.